I think that Bob is good in pointing out that you have to see problems from a global perspective. You have to look at the fact that you can't keep continuing energy consumption and production for 400 years. But from a personal perspective, the question you have to ask is a lot smaller than that. It's, where do I fit into the picture? What are the choices which you have when you go to vote in November? What are the choices which you have when you go home tonight, with the conversations you have with people? Where do they fit into the picture? And for us, we really don't have a choice about it. There was a quote which summarised it quite well. This is from the Generation Zero Facebook page. So it's not about politics, it's not about loving nature, it's about a future that's not shit. And the thing is that from our perspective, when you look at it from a small individual perspective, there is a huge amount of problems and a huge amount of threats to our future. But the only choice we have within that is to do what we can, because we might as well go home and shoot ourselves if we're going to sit around and twiddle our thumbs, because if we're going down the path of planetary collapse, then that's one viable alternative. Give us 20 years and then watch a few wars break out and see you later. But I think that you've got to be a little bit more optimistic than that. You have to realise that, sure, we've been getting worse on environmental things for the last 100 years. But we've been making massive progress in so many other areas, in human rights, and little things that we take for granted, like technological development. There's been so much progress, and that's come through small actions of individuals. So I guess, and I don't want to plug the Generation Zero card too hard tonight, because if you want to leave here and do something which is worthwhile within your own life, then that's powerful. But one option certainly is this campaign we're working on, and we say that when there are these massive problems, we as youth, and welcome old people, I don't mean to exclude you from this discussion, but particularly us as youth.
We can even wear chicken gear.
The older generation left us with a legacy which isn't looking that good, but we do have the potential to make changes in that. At the same time, the older generation left us with a huge amount of solutions out there. We know that societal change is possible. It's a question of, can we take the actions which will make it get there? And I think that there is an election 4 months away. Governments will feel the consequences of how youth vote. And they'll be kind of surprised, right? Because when hundreds of youth around the country start knocking on MPs' doors and saying, yo, we're having meetings with you guys, then they're actually going to be so surprised, because usually we're the ones who sit around doing very little. So I think this has the potential to be doubly powerful, because not only are we usually so useless, but we're also going to be incredibly amazing over the next 4 months. So on the Generation Zero front, all I'll say is that we've got so much planned for the next few months. Fill out those sheets on the seats underneath you, and take the steps that you can to get involved with this campaign, because the reality is that we have 30 or 40 years within which there are critical decisions which we as young people have to make. There have been problems which other generations have been defined by, and our generation will be defined by what we do on climate change. I think that we can do massively positive things, and I'm really looking forward to that belief coming true in the next few months. Thanks, everyone.
As Lloyd said, if you have a place you need to go right now, you're free to go. We're not going to trap you here and force you to ask questions. But don't forget the other things that Lloyd said, which is that, you know, you've got to actually do something here. But when we have a bit of settled time, I think we should probably invite up all the speakers maybe to stand up at the front, or... Oh, and if you are leaving and you have written something on that piece of paper, could you leave it on that table just down there at the front? That would be really awesome, because we want to see what you have to say. Yeah. So the speakers, obviously, Jeanette can't be here anymore. She's got to manage a dinner party. But if the speakers come to the front and answer questions. Yeah, we'll be running mics, I guess. If you flick it on, it should work. Good shit, right?
Just put your hand up if you have a question, and we'll take the mic out to you. Yeah, Sam up the back in the blue.
It's for Bob. While we've still got some resources, maybe, what does he think we should be investing in terms of alternatives, etc.?
What should we be investing in terms of alternatives?
Well, at an individual level, perhaps.
Individual doesn't work with this problem. There's a famous paper called The Tragedy of the Commons by Garrett Hardin back in 1968, and he was mostly concerned about the population problem at that stage. And he discussed the situation whereby if we individually didn't have children, okay, would that solve the problem? And the answer is obviously no, if there is a large number of other people who are continually having children. Okay, in fact, it would be even worse than that because of evolution, you'd actually, the people who had the propensity to not have children would be the DNA would be gone. So, Jeanette's quite right. In terms of setting examples and, feeling good and so on, it's useful to do the right thing. But the really important thing that Jeanette said is that there has to be political action. It has to go across the board. We've got to convince the whole world to do this. People in China, people in India, because unless everyone gets on board, it's not going to happen. So, that's a depressing statement, because that means, changing your own light bulbs and doing the right things at home is not going to solve the problem. But I'm not, I guess I'm not terribly interested in feeling good personally. Okay? I would rather save the world. Okay? I think that's more important than me feeling good. Sorry, does that answer your question? The alternatives for the future in terms of renewables? I didn't touch that. Josh talked about... Ashton, sorry. Ashton. I remember numbers but not names.
I need my... Well, I mean, the question was more on an individual basis, wasn't it?
Well, renewables.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. What renewables? Yeah, I should answer that because I wrote a paper on that. As one does. Not wanting to brag, but it is really important. Can we do what the IPCC said? Okay, the answer is probably yes. Okay, we can probably put in place renewables which will replace certainly our present electricity supply and possibly the world system. But it would take a lot of copper, steel, aluminium, all the different metals. The incident sunlight is not the only problem. It's actually getting the resources to make all the bits and pieces. But if we do that and we still want to grow forever, we're stuffed. Okay, so the important thing is to come to some decision at some time to say enough's enough. If we keep on wanting to grow, this is exactly, you can see that Jeanette and I talk together pretty often. Okay, we think pretty much alike. She's more politically sensitive and in touch with the New Zealand political scene than I am. And she's much more active in terms of trying to get movement. But in terms of the basic issues, what she said and what I said were exactly the same. We can't have growth. The possible difference is that she hasn't quite come to the conclusion yet that not having growth means that we can't have our present economic system. Okay, and that's a really big step. Okay, because it's all very well to say, let's tone things down and not grow. But as soon as you challenge the world economic system, you're up against the big boys. Okay, the World Bank, the economists, the American military, the American system is all for growth. So as soon as you challenge that, you really let yourself wide open. Okay, so yes, we can move to renewables, and it's certainly technically possible, but if we want to keep growing that capacity forever, we run out. The limits to growth, Meadows, Danella Meadows and the group and the Club of Rome came to that exact conclusion. They run scenarios for different energy consumptions and productions. And if you double the energy supply, then you eventually run into a pollution problem. Even if you had an infinite amount of energy, even if we had the energy of the galaxy in a suitcase or something, the problem would not then be energy supply, but be getting rid of our energy waste and getting rid of all the pollution products. So, it's the unfortunate truth that we have to give up growth, and it's highly likely, I think, that we're going to have to come to a new economic solution. I think the present economy has served us extremely well. Well, sort of. It's led to a lot of inequalities. The present economy works very well when we've got an increasing energy supply, because that means you can have more things. That means that you can have more money. But when you've got a decreasing energy supply, then the whole economic situation changes. And you have to have a new paradigm. And I don't know what that paradigm is. There are some people working on it. There is John Peet, who some of you may have heard of. He gave his talk from Canterbury University last week. There's a group, not Zero Growth, what do they call themselves? Centre, CASE, Centre for Steady-State Economy. What's his name? The American economist. Quickly, someone help me. Herman Daly, who's been working on these problems now for 2 decades, World Bank economist. But it's very early days, and it's hard to see how we can change, how we can change our money system to something which doesn't rely on interest. I guess it's beyond my scope to actually sketch out what a steady-state economy or a degrowth economic system would be like. But if there are economists, any economists amongst us in the audience? You don't count. Okay. It's supposed to be the dismal science. I thought we'd have a lot of economists here tonight.
They were scared to come.
Pardon?
They were scared to come.
They were scared to come, possibly. But we need a new economic system. We need a new legal system. One of the biggest problems I see is the way companies work and corporations work. So we need a new corporate law. We need a new way of defining how corporations work, where the shareholders are not the central aim, that the corporations work for the world, for people, for the well-being of society, not for shareholders.
Is this socialism, Bob?
Well, it's not socialism. The guy that I talked about, Erich Fromm, was a Freudian Marxist, but he criticised both Marx and Freud. Okay, Marxism and socialism, as has been experienced in the past, has been in favour of growth. Okay, all Russian, Russian Marxism was all growth orientated. Stalinism certainly was. So it's not socialism. It's sort of eco-socialism, or I heard there's even a term for it. I thought I'd invented it, but they're called the watermelons. Green on the outside and red on the inside. So we need a new system of things, but it certainly has to have a lot of social justice principles in it, equality and so on. I've said enough. Next question.
No. Have you heard of transition towns? Transition towns. The person asked. Yeah. So you know the group. Yeah. They'd probably be experts in that. Yeah.